Welcome back to another episode of the Yellowhammer Sports Podcast. I'm your host, CJ Duncan. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. What an amazing slate of games we had this past weekend. You know what? The results of these games are really going to shake up the whole playoff that we'll see later this year going into next year. But before we get to that, let's introduce our guest for the week. This guy is a Montgomery native, former Jeff Davis student athlete, graduated from the University of Alabama. He was a sports talk radio. He was in sports talk radio in Montgomery for 32 years. He has been with WAKA Action 8 News for nearly 22 years. And he also has a lot of experience as a youth football and basketball coach with the YMCA. John Longshore, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you, CJ. Glad to be here.
Well, it is definitely a privilege and an honor to have you. How are things going? Give the audience a little insight on what you've been up to.
Well, it's been going great, certainly with the college football season well underway and everything else that's going on. It's a great time of year, but my former radio partner and I got back together right before the season started. It's called Longshore and McKnight, presented by Bud Light. We're on every day, every morning on YouTube. You can search YouTube, just type in Longshore and McKnight, and we are there. We're talking about all the topics, all the latest news. It's very similar to what we did for almost 27 years together. Barry McKnight is my partner. He's the voice of Troy. If you listen to Troy football, basketball, or baseball, you hear that silky voice of Barry McKnight describing all the action. And Barry and I got back together. We were apart for about 7 or 8 months, not of our own doing, but wanted to stay together. Like I said, we've been together 27 of my 32 years in radio was with Barry. So we had a great relationship and just kind of a unique format. And we have got it back together. And there again, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're everywhere you can find us. And it's been a lot of fun getting back together.
That's awesome. And you know, we're glad to see you all back together and looking forward to all the content that is to come. So like I mentioned earlier, you have been in this media broadcasting game for a long, long time, and you're a real OG, as I would like to say, when it comes to the media. Can you think back to what really inspired you to actually start in the media business?
Well, it's an interesting story. When I got out of Alabama and was kind of in the real world, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was in the insurance business, and I was actually at a local watering hole in here in Montgomery with some of my buddies, and they were kind of just talking about, man, you know, you've always been interested in the spreads in football games, and man, you need to call up this local guy in Montgomery that has a show and kind of pick games against the point spread. That person was the legendary voice of the Auburn Tigers, Jim Fife. He had a sports talk radio program. And I called in unannounced one day and I said, Jim, every great sports show has a handicapper, and you've now got me. And he was a little apprehensive about it. He didn't know much about it. There again, it was unannounced. I picked 4 football games against the spread every week, and I'd call in unannounced. And I was very fortunate because I hit 10 out of the first 12 games I released. So the first 3 weeks, people are just, scammering to figure out when I'm going to be on the air to get these free selections against the point spread. As with anything else, I cooled off as the season rolled on, and I was about 50% like everybody else is. But I was very lucky that I got out on a hot streak for people to recognize me. So once that happened, people started picking up on it. Jim picked up on it. I became a big feature of the show. He did not know who I was. After the season was over, he did, because their company got in touch with me about doing a sports talk show on one of their radio stations. And I kind of thought it over, and I thought, I really don't like what I'm doing. I think that would be interesting. I got into it, and there again, 32 years later, I was still doing it. So there again, did it on a whim, kind of a dare from my friends. And I ended up making it my life.
Well, John, I think that and not that I think, I know at this point you and us both, you and I both, we're just sports guys. You know what I mean? We have that in common, and it doesn't matter how far away we get from the game, something's going to pull us right back, right? So I got done with football, and I said, you know what? I'm going to start my life, this next phase of life. I'll get into government affairs and I'll be okay.
Yep.
I did what I had to do when I was playing. Now I can move forward. Little did I know that I'd be, now doing this podcast and also coaching middle school football. It pulled me right back in. And so the reason I bring that up is you also had some time in coaching as well. You coached some little leaguers back in the day doing football and basketball. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and honestly, if you can give me some advice, that'd be great too.
CJ, I can't tell you how much the YMCA influenced my life. When I played Y sports, as a third, fourth, fifth, sixth grader, I loved it. I could not wait for the season to start. I loved football. I loved playing Y football. That was probably my favorite. We had some really good teams, and we'd go to Crampton Bowl here in Montgomery and play for the city championship in the day of football. And, it was just, as a young child, the memories and the excitement were incredible. And then I also played basketball as well, and it was great. I remember playing over at the old South Y by Floyd Junior High School that's no longer there anymore, and played games at the Southeast Y and all over town, and then was fortunate enough to make a couple of the all-star teams, and we would go play in other parts of the state, and it was just phenomenal. And my memories that I had at playing Y sports, I wanted to bring that back to younger generations. And so my daughters, my son, I was a part of their teams and helped coach them out. But even when they got older and were playing junior high and high school sports, I still wanted to be a part of the Y game and the youth aspect of it, to just kind of, push these girls and boys along to hopefully want to get into sports at the next level, of course, which is junior high and high school sports. And I still found it, CJ, to be as exciting and as fulfilling as it was when I was a child. And I could see it on the faces of these young athletes, how much they enjoyed it, how much they wanted to learn and be a part of what we were doing. And obviously, enjoying the thrills of winning, but also being able to understand and take a loss and how to conduct yourself, when you do lose, and pick yourself back up to get ready for the next week. So I loved it. I felt that I was getting a little old for it, and the younger guys were wanting to kind of take my place in some of the coaching roles, which I certainly was, willing to do. But I can just tell you, it was a great experience, and it certainly helped mold and shape me as a young man.
Well, and that's great. And I just believe that, at that age, whether you're YMCA and even all the way up to middle school, it is just the development part of it is so important, right? Where you're teaching the fundamentals of each sport, but also you're kind of teaching the life lessons that come with that, whether that's, discipline, accountability, playing on a team, being able to lift your teammates up, dealing with adversity, all those things come into play. And even if those kids don't stick with that particular sport, they can always say, you know what, Coach Longshore taught me this back in the day, and I can lean on that the rest of my life as I move forward, because it's going to come back up. That's what life's about, Sure. And so I think it's important to have folks like yourself willing to go coach the younger generation.
Well, and I still have vivid memories of the coaches I had in Y sports, basketball and football. I can still remember them, remember some of the practices that we went through, and maybe they were a little tougher than they are today, than back in our day. And heck, I can even remember when I played junior high ball at Cloverdale and then high school ball at Jeff Davis. You're right. There are things that are learned on that practice field, whether you're in grammar school or high school, that you'll take for the remainder of your life. And there again, things you cannot learn in a classroom. And I've said this so many times on my radio program. There were things that happened at football practice that you just didn't come home and talk about at the dinner table. And you knew what they were about, and you knew that it was to make you stronger, tougher, mold you in to a young man. And they were great. There again, it was a great part of my life and a great part of my upbringing.
That's great. And I feel very similarly about, my time, and, my dad was my coach most of the time, but also had other coaches as well. And I still remember those moments. Those are some of my more vivid memories, even as an adult now. It makes me smile to this day. So Let's jump into this weekend.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, both Alabama teams, Alabama and Auburn, went on the road this weekend and came home with a loss. But let's start off with Alabama. After sitting with this for a few days, what are your thoughts? What did you gather from the Tide's performance at Neyland Stadium?
The one thing that I've really gathered, CJ, is I'm not sure this Alabama team is very talented. And what I mean by that is you look at some of the teams that Nick Saban had after his first season, there was a lot of talent on that field. You could see it. You could see the athletic ability. You could see that these players just walking on the field were better than their opponent. I don't see that with this Alabama team. I'm not sure how many first round draft picks they have on this team. And that every year Alabama was sending people to the NFL draft and they were getting multiple picks in the first round. I don't see one yet. I'm just not seeing a first round pick. So I think that's one of the main reasons there. The talent level is not where it has been in the past. I think the quarterback play, I was critical of Jalen Milroe last year. I think Jalen Milroe is a great athlete. I think he's a great face of the program. I'm not sold he's a great quarterback. And I think you saw a glimpse of that in the first couple of games, the first half of the Georgia game. But since then, I felt like he's kind of slipped back to where he was last year. And just being, a guy that can command the offense, see the field, know everything that's going on at that quarterback position. I feel like he's regressed back to some of what happened last year. CJ, the running game is non-existent. And I've been hearing all summer long, the running back room is loaded. And it might be. But I don't see any running backs on that field that are similar to running backs that Alabama fans have seen over the last 15 years. 3 Heisman, the ball around more offensively. Defensively, I see defensive backs that are lost. And I know they're young, and I know those cornerbacks are freshmen, but here you're into the 9th week of the year. They should have those problems corrected. I think some teams that have played Alabama recently also, CJ, have kind of figured Alabama out a little bit. I'm not sure in the first part of the season that was the case. I'm kind of getting that feel now. Now, saying all that, is it all doom and gloom? No. I think Alabama's still in the college football playoff race, but they can't lose another game. They got to start this Saturday with Missouri. They got to take care of them. They're going to have to go to Baton Rouge and win. And those, to me, are the 2 toughest hurdles left on this team. But I see some discipline issues, too many stupid penalties. I mean, just, those type things will kill you. Taking advantage of turnovers. Tennessee turns the ball over 3 times last week. Alabama gets 7 points out of it. Can't do that. Got to take advantage of those opportunities. So, I know that's a lot that I'm throwing out there at you, but that's what I'm seeing. And, can it get fixed between last week and this week? That's a great question because I thought they could get it fixed between Vanderbilt and South Carolina. I know they won the game, but they didn't look good. And I thought they could get it fixed between South Carolina and Tennessee, and obviously they didn't.
Yeah, I think you make several great points. Starting off with the talent, right? To your point, Alabama used to be just littered with first round talent, right? And this year, you could kind of see Proctor on the offensive line becoming a first round guy. And, Lawson may sneak in, but at the linebacker position, but linebackers don't usually go that high, right? So those are the only guys that kind of just jump off the board. Of course, the young fella outside playing receiver, he's going to be there one day. But right now, in this moment, this year, you don't really see the amount of talent that, like you said, during the Saban era that you would see on a very consistent basis. But I do want to dive into one thing that you said about teams figuring Alabama out.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I kept telling myself watching that game. I said, Alabama is so predictable. there's no type of creativity that's going on with this offense, right? And so, Coach DeBoer, bread and butter is offense and managing quarterbacks and creating these superstar quarterbacks. And I feel like they're kind of doing Jalen a disservice at times, right? So we all saw, he did not have his finest moment this weekend, and really this year has been a bit of a struggle, right? He's gotten bailed out a couple times by some really good receiver play, but I wish Coach DeBoer and the offensive coaches really just got a little bit more creative.
Sure.
This year going into the season, I kept saying, hey guys, we got to get Kendrick Law involved. He's a guy that's a top 2 or 3 athlete on your team, and he's not touching the ball. The first touch he gets on a jet sweep this weekend, he goes down the sideline. He's one tackle away or one defender away from scoring.
Yeah.
You got to get him the ball. This is a guy that should be Jalen's, parachute. He should be a guy that Jalen can lean on, third and short, third and medium, whether you're giving them jet sweeps or you're giving them swing routes or screens out of the backfield, or, you give them an option route from the slot position. This is a guy that has to be an integral part of the offense. And he just has not been leading up to this, to start this season. We're about halfway through now.
Yep.
But then also, I would love for them to move the pocket a little bit. Jalen's not a straight drop back guy. We can go ahead and get past that. I don't know if he's trying to show the NFL this to prove that he is an NFL quarterback, but a straight drop back guy is just not in his repertoire, right? So let's move the pocket. Let's do some RPOs. Let's do some boots. Let's get the play action involved. You got a physical back in Jam Miller, right? If you pound him a few times and then you put the ball in his stomach and pull it back out, you're going to get those linebackers to start creeping up. You know what I mean? They're going to get a little eerie about that run game, and then you can shoot it right over the top. So I would love for Coach DeBoer and the offense to kind of play toward Jalen's strengths. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm with you there, and I still think his strongest attribute is his running ability. There were times in that Tennessee game I think he should have pulled up and run. There was a lot of green grass in front of him there. So, yeah, I'd like – there again, I know he runs a lot, and I know they're trying to get him to not take off as quickly as maybe he did last year, but you don't want to push that to the side, because to me, he is a phenomenal runner. I think his passing skills have gotten better. Didn't see him throw it across the middle a lot last year. We're seeing some passes to the tight end. I'd like to see more. I think the tight end needs to get more involved in this Alabama offense. But, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there again, it goes back to the athlete. He is a phenomenal athlete. Use every trick in the book that will make this offense run going through Jalen Milroe. And there again, you can't limit him. You got to work on his strengths, and whether it's throwing to different receivers. I think he eyed Ryan Williams way too much, maybe predetermined. That's where he was going before the snap last week. And I will say this, CJ, and I've heard it all week. Maybe it's time for Ty Simpson to get in the game. I'm not. They're not there yet. I don't think that's where they need to go. They just got to clean up and really zero in on what they really want Jalen to do.
Yeah, and you don't want to lose the locker room either. This guy is a leader of this team. If you bench him, now the players start questioning the coaches, right? And you don't want to lose this locker room. Right now, it's about settling everybody down, because guess what? These players, they don't want to lose either, and they're not used to losing. Somebody's got to go in there and settle everybody down. And I'm with you on the Ryan Williams comment. They've got to get out of this just back shoulder throw to him in the red zone. Listen, he's a phenomenal athlete. He's a phenomenal receiver, and he's going to do great things in his career. But the way that he's built, he's not this just huge kid or super tall guy that you can just throw jump balls to.
Yeah.
And it has gotten them in trouble on many occasions, whether it's a third down and they don't convert, or an interception like it was this past weekend. They've got to get out of that. I mean, with this kid being so polished already, there are other routes in the route tree that he can run in that lower red area to get open. To me, just throwing a jump ball is just it's not going to get it done.
No, heck no. And what about, getting the kid hurt? I mean, he's taking some shots. He took some shots up in Knoxville last week.
Yes. No, I agree completely. And let's go back to the defense a little bit. Like you said, they're young in the secondary, but they have two veterans at the safety position, right? You have Malachi Moore, and then you also have Keon Sabb there as well. These freshmen are rotating in every so often, every other series or whatever it may be. They are young, but like you said, we're getting further along in the season. They should start to pick up things. I go back and forth on what I feel about them because I want them to be a little bit more disciplined, right, and have great eyes, as they say in the cornerback room. You don't want your eyes in the backfield. You want it on your target, and you want to be able to stay in phase. Sometimes they're a little shaky when it comes to that, but this group is very opportunistic as well. I mean, they are causing turnovers. They're getting interceptions, they're forcing fumbles, recovering fumbles as well. Well, what is your overall gauge on them and their progression?
Well, Malachi Moore, we know what he can do.
Mhm.
Keon Sabb, I'm not sure he's going to be playing for a couple of weeks. He's got a little foot injury that might keep him on the sidelines for a minute or two. The cornerbacks, CJ, I mentioned this after the South Florida game. I mentioned it after the Wisconsin game. Those teams had receivers running wide open down the middle of the field, 4 or 5 yards away from a cornerback. Lucky for Alabama, those quarterbacks for those two teams couldn't hit them. I mean, they're overthrowing them, underthrowing them, but these guys are wide open. And I made the statement, people are going to pick up on that, and they're going to face teams with better quarterbacks, and they're going to get burned. I saw that Saturday in Knoxville. I saw cornerbacks running down the field, 4 yards behind the wide receivers, backs to the quarterback, really not knowing if the ball's in the air or not. And it reminded me of some old defensive backs at Alabama when Bill Curry was the coach. I'm really going back now. I'm showing everybody how old I am. And I'm thinking, man, what is going on here? Now, there again, Alabama fans are used to great cornerback play, great secondary play. When Saban was there, he had tremendous athletes at that position. And I know these guys are young. But to answer your question, and I know there's been some turnovers, no doubt, but I really have not seen the steady progression of these guys being able to cover guys. I mean, I think Carson Beck threw some interceptions that were I'm still trying to figure out who he was throwing the football to.
Yes.
And I think early in the Tennessee game, there was a pick that I'm thinking, whoa, who's he looking at here? So I
Well,
think
and Nico missed a couple clear touchdowns if he just gets the ball down a little bit.
Yes, no doubt. So you kind of there again, you can't dodge bullets the whole season. You got to be there, and they've dodged a lot of them. But I just don't think the coverage is as tight and as good as it needs to be.
Now, do you think they should pick two guys and roll with them, or do you think that this kind of rotating door is beneficial for the development of these younger guys?
Yeah, CJ, I'm with you, man. I think you got to go with your lead dog there. I mean, you got to put your best players on the field.
Yes.
Again, this isn't YMCA football. No. Everybody doesn't get to play.
No participation awards here, right?
So, yeah, I think you got to put your best out there and let those guys win football games for you. And I'll say this about Alabama. I think we forget when Kalen DeBoer got there, they had 39, 40 players bolt. And then DeBoer was not able to go into that portal because of, Saban leaving and all that, whatever that rule is. So they're playing from behind from the get-go. So, you got that factored in. And I've always wondered, CJ, you've heard that Nick Saban left because of NIL and the transfer portal, which I agree. I think that's not what he signed up for. I think those two aspects of college athletics led Saban to retire. You've seen it in basketball. It happened this week with the basketball coach in Virginia. It's happened at North Carolina, Duke, and Villanova. Those coaches said don't want to have any part of it. But I also wonder if Nick Saban, CJ, looked at his roster and said to himself, we're not a championship roster. I'm not sure I want to go through. I've been doing it for 17 years. I don't know if I'm in the rebuilding stage anymore. Yeah. And in seeing this team, as you asked me to start this podcast off, I don't see many first-round draft picks on this team. I don't see the talent that I have seen in years past. I know they're young in the secondary, but they're just not as talented now as I've seen some other secondaries in Tuscaloosa.
That makes a lot of sense. So tell me this, as an Alabama fan, going into Saturday against Missouri, what do you want to see out of this ball club on Saturday? What needs to happen to make everyone else feel better about the rest of the season, and what's going to lead them towards success?
Well, I really would like to see a better, more effective running game. But against South Carolina and Tennessee, they averaged about 2.5 yards a carry. So explosive runs. Jam Miller reminds me of Mark Ingram. And you're going, well, wait, the guy won the Heisman. But I never thought of Mark Ingram as this elusive, slippery, scat back kind of guy that could break through a hole. That kind of runner that Alabama's
like a Jahmyr Gibbs kind of
guy.
Yes,
exactly. Exactly. So I want to see more out of this running game. I do want to see the Jalen Milroe we saw in the first 4 games of the season. I'd like to see more of that as well. I'd like to see more, a variety of wide receivers being targeted, including the tight end. And I'd like to see better secondary play, particularly at the corners. To me, those are the areas that Alabama has got to get shored up if they want to make a run and to be one of the 12 participants in the college football playoff.
I agree. And, like you said, there's a game that's looming on that schedule down in Baton Rouge that will be a very tough game as they're trending upward, and unfortunately Alabama's trending the opposite direction. So let's get to the Auburn Tigers.
Sure. Okay.
Another tough loss for them. Played very close with Missouri. Are you seeing any hope, any light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this team? And not just this season, right? This season may be a wash for them just based on what they have right now, especially at the quarterback position. But do you see something that they could really, hang their hats on moving forward, maybe into next season?
CJ, if they lose in Lexington Saturday night, the veteran players might just say we're done. This is it. I think you got to worry about that. I think the younger players are still in it. They're still buying in, but I'm worried about the veterans on this team. Even, you look at their schedule. I mean, heck, they got Vandy coming up next week. They got it. They got A&M on the schedule. Got to go to Alabama. So the schedule doesn't look overly promising. And I'll tell you, it's when Auburn hired Hugh Freeze, I was a big proponent of them hiring him years ago. But the timing wasn't right. Some off the field issues needed to settle down. He kind of needed to reinvent himself at Liberty, which he did. And I said, folks, here's your guy. You can forget about Lane Kiffin. You can forget about Deion Sanders. Here's a guy that knows what the SEC is all about. He knows what Auburn wants. He knows how to recruit in this league, but you've got to be patient. Now, Hugh Freeze made some mistakes. There's no doubt about it. I think he's made a huge mistake at quarterback, not going into the portal. I said this months ago. There's not a team in the SEC other than Mississippi State that Peyton Thorne could start for. That ain't good. And Hugh Freeze, his offense runs around a quarterback that can make things happen in the RPO game. They don't have a guy out there that can do it. So that's their first big problem. I've heard analysts say Jarquez Hunter is the best running back in the league. He might be, but they got to give it to him more. And that offensive line has got to produce more holes for him. Yeah. These young wide receivers, I think I was expecting a little more out of them. That big group that they hauled in, I've been a little, that has kind of surprised me a little bit. But all in all, it's got to be patient. You look at what Hugh Freeze is doing on the recruiting trail. Got a very highly rated class. And I know there's some panic. Oh, boy, if we keep losing, then we're going to lose this class. I don't buy into that because my thought is these kids are, particularly this day and age, I can come play there in the fall. I can be starting immediately. Yeah. So that's the selling point. These kids want to play, and they can play there, and they can be a part of the rebuilding process at Auburn. Look, if they'd have hired Lane Kiffin or Deion Sanders, would the record be better today? Maybe it would be. Maybe so. Deion's doing pretty good in Boulder. Lane's doing pretty good in Oxford. But they do it a different way. Hugh Freeze realizes we got to start from the bottom, build from the ground up, get this high school recruiting going, build a foundation. They just got to give him time. And then let's face it, Auburn doesn't need more bad publicity of running a coach after his second or third year. They've paid enough coaches off. They got enough history in running people. Look, this is their bed. They got to sleep in it. And they got to give Hugh Freeze a little more time. Are there more rough patches? Are there more bumps in the road? I believe so. But I think this is a long-term project, not short-term.
I agree. I think people have to realize how hard of a transition it is when you go from coach to coach, right? From the locker room all the way up, to the administration. It is a very tough transition, and you got to give a coach time to get his guys in there, whether that's coaches that are coming in or that's even players. He's still playing with Harson's guys, right?
Yep.
And so if you give him a couple recruiting classes, allow him to get the guys that fit his system, and then you have a quarterback, you don't necessarily even have to have a quarterback that can you snap him the ball and he's going to go win you the game. You need a guy who's not going to lose you the game. I think what's happening to Auburn is the turnovers are just brutal. They're just brutal. You see them having really great jobs, and especially running the ball where they're running, RPOs, and they're getting Peyton Thorne on the edge or getting Jarquez Hunter on the edge. And then all of a sudden it's either a fumble or it's just a terribly thrown ball. And now you lose all the momentum. And when you're on the road, you just can't do those things, because 9 times out of 10, that's going to lead to points for the opposition. And with Missouri having such talented receivers, you just can't do those type of things. They've got to find a guy who's not going to lose in the game, a guy that's going to keep him in the game. And you know what? It'd be great if there was someone who can go win it for them. They've had the luxury of having a Cam Newton before, but you don't necessarily need a Cam Newton at a place like Auburn. Auburn can recruit. And like you said, those high school guys will be fine. They know they can play early.
Yep.
And they know that coach is still working through, some of the skeletons of last coach's, time period. And he's explaining that to the kids as well. So, and Auburn's got plenty of money as well. And you have to bring that up in this age of football, right? So I think they'll be fine. They've got a top quarterback coming in, and these young receivers, they'll eventually catch on. Not everybody is can come in like Jeremiah Smith or even the guy up at Alabama, where they're just coming in day one, ready to go. It doesn't always happen that way.
No.
Cam Coleman is a physical just freak, right? And he can run, and he's got size. Once he slows the game down, he gets that route running polished up, he's going to be just fine. So it's going to be there. It's going to be fine. Like you said, he's just building that foundation. Once that happens, all it needs is a signal caller, and I think Auburn will be back to where they once were.
Yeah, totally agree. I've been preaching it, CJ, since day one. You got to be patient, Auburn fans. I know it's ugly. I know it's not fun. I get it. But you got to be patient. And based on what happened when Brian Harsin was there, I mean, come on. You got a lot of rebuilding to do. It ain't going to happen instantly. And I thought that was a great point you made, CJ, bringing his players, his philosophy, his type of game. You can say the same thing about Kalen DeBoer. I mean, they've lost 2 games. They could certainly lose more. I think Bama fans have got to realize, look, you've had it way too good for 17 years. You got a new guy coaching players he didn't recruit. You got to give him time to get his player, his kind of philosophy going. I mean, I go back. I mean, you ask Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, and Lincoln Riley. None of them have beaten Kalen DeBoer. So the guy obviously can do something.
He's a winner. Wherever he goes, he's a winner. And it's not just the coaches, right? It's the players as well. When you come in and, a lot of times, especially, I'm an offensive guy, so I like to think of it from that perspective. But, a lot of the concepts may be the same, but the lingo's a little different, right? And it can be something as simple as running a dig, right? And some coaches want you to come out the break full speed, and the quarterback's going to hit you if you're open, right? Other coaches, they want you to come out that dig, and they want you to throttle down in the zone. You got a lot of players that are thinking instead of playing, right?
Yes.
And that slows you down. In that conference, this is all it takes, right? It doesn't take much, but that little bit of hesitation can throw everybody off. I mean, how many times did Milroe, it looks like he's throwing just a little bit behind the guy or just a little bit over. And of course, Milroe's going to take it as the quarterback, but also from our couch, we can't tell if the receiver ran at the right depth. We can't tell if he was supposed to throttle down because it was his own coverage. We don't know those things. But when you have new coaches that come in with new philosophies, it is a hard transition for everybody involved. And so you want your players to be playing fast with no hesitation. You don't want them thinking too much. You want the instincts to start coming out, right? And
No
Ryan
doubt.
Williams is one of those guys where, you just throw him the ball and instincts happen, but that doesn't work like that for everyone. So I think in due time, all these guys will say, all right, I know what Coach DeBoer is expecting of me. I know what Coach Freeze is expecting of me. And once they can say that without thinking, both teams will start playing better. I guarantee you that.
I totally agree, CJ. And no, I mean, I equate it to going to play golf. If you're thinking, you're making a lot of double bogeys. You got to go out there and react. You got to trust your game. You got to trust being able to get out of that bunker or make that putt. If you start thinking about all this stuff, those are the guys I like to play. I like to play thinkers.
Because it'll get ugly real quick, right?
Yeah, sure.
You're right. There's no difference there. And before we wrap it up today, let's dive into a little bit about that big game at the end of Saturday night, Georgia and Texas. I'm going to let you run with this, but like I always say, when you have two quarterbacks, you have zero quarterbacks, right? And so Texas is kind of running into an issue now where I think, Coach Sark may have pulled the trigger a little too early. And now I'm sure in the locker room, you've got people talking. There's going to be chatter now just because you kind of created your own drama there. What did you see in that Georgia-Texas game on Saturday night?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about locker room drama. With Arch Manning, do they make that move? Is Quinn Ewers, just taking that first loss for this Texas team? Kind of got to wonder what Sark's going to be thinking about there. I tell you one thing that I thought was interesting about that game. Leading up to it, it was all about the offensive and defensive lines for Texas, how many, first-round draft picks they got on it. Georgia went in there and physically whipped that team. I mean, they whipped them. And I don't think Texas was expecting that. I don't think they've experienced that playing in their former league. That, wow, man, these guys came in our house and took care of business. I just thought Georgia was not intimidated, very sharp. I think maybe Texas was a little high on their press clippings, and their fan base was, hey, we're Texas, we're great, we're going to beat anybody. But I think there's a very there again, Texas is at Vandy this week. We've seen what Vandy can do this year. I mean, certainly Alabama fans know that. I think it'll be real interesting if Quinn Ewers comes in there and he's struggling. I mean, you got to get the hook out and you got to get Arch Manning in there. And if he's successful, I think Ewers is on the bench the rest of the season.
It certainly feels that way. And I tell you what, Georgia came in there to me with attitude.
Oh,
like they had something to prove. I feel like they thought people were disrespecting them. They won a couple championships in the last few years, right? They are the big Georgia with the big G on the side of the helmet. And they played like they were pissed off all Saturday night. And they made sure that Texas felt that, and Texas could not match that energy. And you know what? Georgia looked almost flawless, but I'm going to go back to the quarterback position.
Okay.
Man, Carson Beck does not look like the guy that every so-called expert wanted him to be prior to the season. I saw some way too early draft boards that had him as the number one pick.
Yep.
But if Carson Beck plays just a little bit better, a little bit more under control and less turnovers, this game is 40-0.
Yep.
He feels like the one that's holding the team back, not enhancing the team.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And back in the summer, people are asking me, who's your Heisman front runner? I'm going, well, Carson Beck. I mean, seems to be the logical choice. And it's similar. Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, the first half against Alabama, I'm thinking, who is this guy? I mean, he's throwing interceptions and, I don't see a Georgia receiver. Alabama's guys right there in front of him. I'm with you. I don't know what's going on with Carson Beck. Does this game maybe, jumpstart him that he did go on the road? His team got a big win. They're in a great spot for the remainder of the year. You kind of wonder, but yeah, I mean, I got to, I think his draft stock was a lot better at the end of last year than it is currently today.
No, I agree. I think he has gone maybe from I don't want to speak negatively on any of these guys, but just based on what I'm seeing, it just feels like he may have gone from first round to maybe late second, early third kind of guy. And that'll be okay. But right now, his focus should be on how can I get Georgia back to a national championship, and they've got the guys to do it. The way that they played on Saturday, I'm like, man, if they would have carried that over to the Alabama game, or if they would have played that way a few weeks ago, maybe we're having a totally different discussion.
And CJ, I think what's going to be interesting right now today, I see Texas and Georgia meeting again in the SEC championship game. I think Texas is scheduled from here on out very manageable. They do play A&M on the road at the end of the year, but right now, if I'm betting on it, I'm thinking those two teams are going to get to Atlanta. If that does happen, I'm going to be really interested to see what Sarkisian does to get his team like that next level. We're getting disrespected. We're coming out here to kick your tail from the opening snap like Georgia did in Austin last Saturday.
Yeah, and you know what? As a coach, you never want to lose, but you rather lose early than late, right?
Sure.
And so if there is any such thing as a good loss for Texas, this was a good loss. It's early enough in the season to where you can have some style point games to convince the committee that, hey, this team is still strong. They had one bad night, and so I think Texas will be fine. I like that prediction of Texas and Georgia meeting again at some point. I do believe the same. So, any last thoughts as we're going into this weekend? And, Alabama's got Missouri, Auburn's got Kentucky, but we have other great games as well. Any more thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I tell you what, a game that we didn't mention, but I think could go a long way is LSU at Texas A&M Saturday night. I mean, these two teams, they kind of snuck up on everybody. They're right there.
Did.
I mean, LSU got beat early, A&M got beat early, but man, they have gotten it together coming now. And so I see these two teams there again, hadn't had a conference loss. It's one of them will have one Saturday night, but man, watch out for A&M and LSU because they could be sneaking in there and giving Texas and Georgia a little run for their money.
I agree. I like to see what LSU's doing. Great win at home against Ole Miss a few weeks ago, and then beating Arkansas on the road. That's a great win. To go on the road, night game, in a hostile environment like that, to go in there and seem to have the game in hand at an early point is very impressive on their end. So just shows how focused they are as a unit, as a group, and they're going to be tough to deal with as the season continues to progress. But John, I tell you what. Oh, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with you. And I got to just throw this in there. How far has Oklahoma fallen that they're a 3-touchdown underdog against? I mean, I know Ole Miss is good, but 3 touchdowns?
3 touchdowns. Yeah, well, you know what? Sometimes the injury bug gets you so good, you can't do anything about it. It's only so many scholarships in the program. I don't know. I mean, it feels like they're playing with walk-ons at this point, and nothing wrong with that. But, you wish you had your guys, and you also got a freshman quarterback playing as well who is just trying to figure it out. I'm sure he's seeing ghosts out there in the SEC. So I do not envy what they're going through right now in Norman. So, I will be attending the Vanderbilt Texas game. I'm hoping for some more good times in Nashville, as we did a few weeks back with Alabama. But it's a great time to be a part of the SEC and this 12-team playoff. It makes every game very interesting.
That it does. I've been beating the playoff drum since I think I left the hospital 60 years ago. I mean, I've always wondered, think about it. We'll go back to the YMCA. YMCA football. We had a playoff.
Yeah.
Every junior high school, NFL, Division II college football. Every division had a playoff except D1 college football. We finally got the 4-team. Now we're at 12. There's talk of going to 16. Who knows? But I love it because you're right. Every game matters not only for seeding, but getting in the playoff, it gets every bit part of the country still invested and interested in the season. Whereas if, you're at this point and well, we're not going to get one in the playoff, now you might. So I'm with you. I love it.
And it's going to create some new rivalries. When the playoff starts, if you're not one of those top 4 teams, you're going to host a playoff game at your home turf. And that's going to create new rivalries and get more fan bases engaged and connected, which I'm excited to see. It could go in all types of different directions there. But John, it was a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for your time again. I know you always have a spot here at the Yellowhammer Sports Podcast. For all of our listeners and viewers, you can grab all our content on Yellowhammer News, on YouTube, Spotify, even online. Please stay in touch as we continue to deliver all this good content. John, thank you again for your time, and see you all next week.
Sounds great, CJ. Thanks for having me.